dear viewers, including James A. Williams and Shashki P1. This audio story is in honor of the release of Poppy Playtime Chapter 4. It's a big horror game where you try to go through a big playtime place, known as the Hour of Joy, which I don't never understand the Hour of Joy. Well, enough of me spoiling the stories. I don't know what else to say, but let's just get right into it. The writer of this story is Lex's World, Percy's Worst Nightmare. It was the end of a warm October evening, and Percy, the small green engine, was on his way to Timoth's sheds after his last train of mail. He was beginning to think about all the letters and packages he had sent out that day, when all of a sudden he was beginning to run out of steam. His driver and fireman decided to park him in a siding where no one could see him. Then, when the moon shone, Percy's driver and fireman said, "We'll have to leave you here for the night until sunrise tomorrow." Then Percy's driver and fireman went home to bed. "But what if an engine comes along and sees me here?" Percy asked, but his crew was nowhere to be seen. Percy stood in the siding, feeling very lonely. He was afraid, but soon he closed his eyes and went to sleep. Then he had the worst nightmare of his life. Percy was puffing down the tracks to an old bridge, which was high above a shallow ravine. He was anxiously about to make it onto the bridge when he heard a voice. "Hey, Percy." "What was that?" Percy asked nervously. He looked around, but he did not see anyone, so he nervously made his way onto the bridge. But then he heard the voice again. "Percy, I have come for you." "Who's making that sound?" Percy asked anxiously, but he continued on his way. Percy was almost halfway across the bridge when something appeared right in front of him. There was a small red dragon with yellow horns and a scarlet mane. It was Simon Smoke. "There you are, Percy," he said. Percy had an awful fright. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Your crewmates, your money, and all your stuff." "No," said Percy. He didn't want it to happen, so he tried to puff backwards to get away. But then 2 more nightmare critters were blocking his path as he looked back. "You're not alone, Mr. Dragon, are you?" Percy said anxiously. "Of course I'm not," said Simon Smoke, "and I've got many other critters with me." And the nightmare critters, except the ones who were standing behind Percy, stood right in front of him. Percy was trapped on the old bridge. He couldn't go forwards. He couldn't go backwards. He tried to blow his whistle, but he couldn't. His whistle was clogged or something. Percy was scared. Meanwhile, while Percy's eyes were shut tight, and he was still trapped in his nightmare, he began to move backwards, going faster and faster. "Hey!" he yelled. "Somebody help me!" But nobody was aboard to control him. He had no driver or fireman. He raced backwards right through Edward's station, and Edward there was sleeping, when he suddenly was awakened by Percy screaming and puffing down the line. "Percy!" Edward shouted. But Percy was gone. Percy was so frightened that he raced backwards up and down Gordon's Hill without stopping. He nearly flew off the track at a bend which was at the bottom of the hill because his driver and fireman weren't aboard to control him. Ah! They're gonna destroy me! Percy cried as he was heading for the coal yards. Then there was trouble. James was there for a late job. He was to shunt coal for the other engines in the morning. He had finished lining up all of the coal cars when he saw Percy puffing backwards into the coal yard. "Percy!" shouted James. "Watch out! Don't crash into those coal cars!" But it was too late. Percy ran backwards and into the coal cars. Coal flew up into the air and went all over James and Percy, covering them from footplate to fender. "My paintwork!" cried James. "Oh, my shiny red paintwork! It's ruined!" Just then, Percy opened his eyes and awoke from his nightmare. He looked around, saw the mess he had made, and also James's messy paintwork. "Oh, James," he said, "I'm really sorry I ruined your paintwork." And he told James everything that he had been dreaming about. "Silly Percy," said James. "Are you off your tracks?" "No, I'm serious," replied Percy. "It was truly the worst nightmare I've ever had. Even worse than when Harold took the mail from me. It was really terrible. I was so scared. I had no fireman to drive me. Say no more, Percy," interrupted James. "Perhaps I shall take you back to your shed, where you belong. When the sun rises, the mess that you made will surely be picked up." And with that, James took Percy by the buffers and pulled him all the way to Timothy's sheds. As soon as they got there, all the engines were asleep. Percy rolled into his shed, and when he felt the buffers, he fell asleep, hoping that he wouldn't have any more nightmares since that night. Now, I don't think he will ever dream about being trapped on an old bridge and encountering a fierce dragon again. And I also hope that Percy's worst nightmare will ever come to life. Don't you?